Hey, I recall Central Park in. Alright, I broke my little rig, but I still want to use this. Oh, that'll do. Make sure the ruffles are mic'd great. One half high, hit, ba day, boop, ba 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 ba, ra ba 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 ba. Ba da ba 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 ba. It's Wednesday. I'm in love. I was supposed to call my attorneys today, but instead we're gonna do picks of the week. Ba da ba da boo doo. So very slowly but surely getting through my backlog. I think I'm only a couple weeks behind now. I feel better that like I'm budgeting a little bit better. So even though I'm not able to get all my funny books, for one thing, I'll be caught up eventually. It's no real hurry. It's not like I'm hurting for anything to read. And another thing, it doesn't matter. There's more to that, or is it less? I think there's actually. Okay, so this first book actually did come out this week. This is After Dark. This is a one shot from the good people at Aftershock. After Dark, yeah. It is magazine size, and it's a horror anthology. And the main reason I bought it is because Jim Starlin has a story in it. Jim Starlin's most famous for having created Thanos and a lot of um, Marvel's cosmic characters and like Adam Warlock and characters like that. And he still turns out really good work. And then also Frank Thierry has a story in this, and I've always liked him. Cullen Bunn is in here, and Cullen Bunn wrote The Sixth Gun, which remains one of my absolute favorite comic book titles that makes you have a lisp. Yes, do you have The Sixth Gun? um, I didn't. That character is effeminate, but is not gay. It's just how he talks. And then after the Sixth Gun, which was like his, I think he had written some stuff before that, but that was definitely his big break. And it was a self-published, well, not self-published, but it was a small, it was on Oni, I believe, smaller press, but it was an indie darling, and it was critically acclaimed. It was really good. One of my favorite books for years. And it had elements of horror to it, but it was really more of a weird western, uh, kind of heavy on the adventure side of things more than the horror. It's like more supernatural than horror. But after Six Gun, even I think he wrote some stuff during Six Gun. Yeah, he definitely. Oh, that's right. He wrote Magneto for Marvel for a while, which that was really good. So yeah, he was able to get up to the big leagues, and then he started writing a lot of horror books for Dark Horse mostly. I think also for Image. I mean, he's very prolific. He writes a lot. But honestly, like I think it was Harrow County was I bought whatever he was doing horror wise, and Harrow County was where it kind of lost me, and it wasn't terrible. It was just kind of he was kind of going back to the same well a lot. So I don't like to talk shit. And I'm not. I mean, I'm excited to read this story because it's been a long time since I've read a Cullen Bunn story, and I guess I'll report back to you if it was worth it. Because that's what you are all tuning in for, right? Me in about 4 weeks. Also, these did not come out this week, but this finally came in. This is Ninjak 3 and 4 from the good people at the Valiant Comics group. I've really been enjoying this because, I mean, Jeff Parker is a really good writer, and he doesn't. I think he writes almost only for Valiant now, and not very much. So, man, back in the day, it was probably about 10 years ago, maybe less. Yeah, it was certainly like in the teens when he really hit his stride. But he wrote one of my favorite runs on Aquaman, and he wrote Agents of Atlas for Marvel, which was a really fun book that I kind of was late to, but was happy to it. Like I came in on the second series, so like he did a mini series. I want to say in the late aughts, and then the Agents of Atlas were all characters from the 50s that never really characters that were around in the 50s aren't very popular now. 3D Man, Gorilla Man, and Jimmy Woo, who's now part of the MCU, is portrayed by Russell Park, who's a great actor. So Agents of Atlas was fun because it was these, and like they not only were they characters from the 50s, but they also had a very 50s vibe to them. It was a really fun book. And then I think Greg Pak might have taken it over after a while, but or well, I know Gene Luen Yang is writing more Agents of Atlas stuff these days, but they don't have a regular book like they used to. So I missed the first miniseries, but when the regular series started and Jeff Parker was writing that, I had read something else, I don't know what, but I was like, I like this guy. And so, but then Agents of Atlas became my favorite. He also wrote Thunderbolts for a while. It was also super good. So yeah, Ninjak, I am definitely enjoying Jeff Parker's writing again, especially because it's been such. It feels like a long time since I've read anything. But Javier Pulido, I've mentioned a million times, used to draw for Human Target when Cliff Chang wouldn't. Cliff Chang, I want to say, was the main artist on Human Target, but Pulido would fill in for an arc here or there. I could have it backwards though. Pulido might have been the main artist. I just remember them both, and they have similar styles but very distinctive from each other. I would say definitely in the same ballpark, and that's really the funnest part. And these covers don't do the books justice. I don't not to cast aspersions on who did do these covers, but this was came out months ago, and they only just now sent it to the shop. And that big ding in the corner. But clearly, I'm not that into condition of this other one. This is the Phantom Stranger number 21. This is a Bronze Age book. This is another nice thing about working at a comic shop that I'd kind of forgotten is that I don't really. I mean, I want my comics to be in as good condition as possible. So for maximum rereading. But I'll also take home a Beat to Hell copy. The cover on this has come off. I couldn't even fit it into a Silver Age bag. I had to put it in a Golden Age bag because it's all the spine is all warped out of shape. It's like the staples are supposed to be on the spine. They're like here now. Yeah, it's really beat to hell. But I love the Phantom Stranger, and this was a really and I've said this a gajillion times, but never really like DC's superhero books are always going to be way far from Marvel. Like it's not even close. But their especially their horror, war, and western books totally blow Marvel out of the water. I mean, they had none of those genres have been popular since the 70s, but this is from the 70s. And this was another horror book. So it was, I mean, more like a supernatural thing. The Phantom Stranger was kind of like your narrator, and he's like this ghostly presence. He's like a cosmic being. I think they kind of go on. I don't know how to explain it. Oh yeah, okay. So where Marvel has like uh, a cosmic sort of universe that's like part of the Marvel universe, but kind of separate from all the other goings on Earth, you know. And there's a lot of like and then there's like on Earth there's the big like Avengers and Thor and Iron Man, but then you have your street level like Daredevil and stuff like that. So within superhero comics, there's kind of different neighborhoods, I guess you could say, subgenres, I guess. And so I feel like DC's magic universe is comparable to Marvel's cosmic stuff because DC has like cosmic, and Phantom Stranger would consider him like a cosmic. Spectre is also that, but those characters tend to reside more in the magical side of DC, which is your Zatannas, your Swamp Things. John Constantine, even though he used to be a Vertigo character only, has been in the DCU for like 10 years. The Demon, one of my absolute favorites. So where like DC does have big cosmic dark side, I guess that's sort of like the Kirby stuff, the New God stuff. That would be their cosmic stuff. It's not like when Kirby did that for DC though, it wasn't that popular, and they've done. I mean, obviously they use dark side a lot, but with like Mr. Miracle has kind of made a comeback over the last couple of years, courtesy of Tom King, I guess, or Taylor. I can never remember which. I think it's King. I think Tom King wrote Mr. Miracle. Um, boy, all right, 10 minutes in, that's about right. I've completely gone off on a tangent and lost my point is that yeah, um, the magic books in DC are real fun to me too. They tend to bleed into the horror books too. But the thing, what I really wanted to get to is that Bronze Age horror, in particular, was a lot of anthology. So you had Phantom Stranger was an anthology in that there was he tells a different sort of tale every time. Yeah, so it's not that different because then you had House of Secrets and House of Mystery, where you had your hosts Cain and Abel, who are the biblical brothers, and Cain is often killing Abel, I think in every issue. And that was like that was DC's kind of Tales from the Crypt book, like their kind of EC book, there's your horror hosts. So yeah, I that's to me the horror comics for me kind of begin and end in EC in the 1950s, and they were all anthologies. So even though Phantom Stranger is not the same, it's in the same boat. Okay, I've officially bored myself. Great. I just almost immediately, it's like I haven't talked to you in a minute. How have you been? It's like I'm talking and I'm engaged with the material, and then it's like a switch in my head goes bored. That's actually how I react to almost everything in life. Not always to my advantage, I'll admit. Okay, I got a lot of reading done this last week. We'll start with last week's picks, obviously. Dark Ages #2. This continues to be good fun. Um, like I said last week, it's almost become a steampunk book because now you have life on Earth with absolutely no electronics whatsoever. Oh, right. And then oh gosh, the staple fell out of this one too. Yada yada. Um, so the surviving heroes have attempted to keep people safe, and it's actually quite utopic. And then apocalypse shows up. Wah, wah. So that's where that's going from there. So yeah, this is fun. I don't think I'm gonna. I'm starting to think a lot of these books and like, do I really need this? And then I'm like, yeah, it's fun. I don't know. Will I ever read it again? I don't know. I'm never gonna read anything again. I gotta finish a lot of stuff. This was great. Okay, so Darkhold Iron Man. Yeah, this was super good. So, as I think I've poorly explained, the premise behind this Darkhold mini series is that the uh, Necronomicon has been discovered, the real Darkhold book, it's the Necronomicon, but in Marvel Universe they call it the Darkhold. So it's been an artifact in the Marvel Universe since like the 70s, but now it's the real one. Now we found the real one. And the Scarlet Witch is like, well, we have to destroy it. And Doctor Doom's like, no, we have to use it to our advantage. And so, but also, he also agrees it needs to be destroyed. They enlist 5 superheroes to help them with this. And it's a goofy premise. Now I'm not remembering it very well, and I think I've already explained it, so now I'm just blathering. They each have to read of the Darkhold, but to read too much causes you to go mad, mad. I tell you, and that's what's happened. All 5 of them go, and they become dark, evil versions of themselves. So that's the main storyline, and that was all in Darkhold Alpha, and then Darkhold Omega will be the wrap up. But these 5 standalone books are what those heroes read. So this is what Iron Man read, and he went, and he went, and it's really good. It starts with the Iron Man's origin, and he escapes from the cave with the terrorists, and he's got the rig. I can't remember what it's called now. It's not a repulsor engine, but it is, you know what I mean. The thing that he has. Sorry, I'm a little loopy today. Um, but he's wearing the armor too much. It starts to take him over, and then so eventually it completely takes him over. And Pepper Potts is narrating the story, so it's like this horror. It's like this very Frankenstein vibe where her and Happy are watching Tony just be consumed by his armor, quite literally. And he goes indeed mad. So it's fun. And Ryan North was the first thing I think I'd ever read by him. I was very impressed. I'll read Squirrel Girl eventually. There's so many things I need to read. We'll get to that. This was great. Deadpool, Black, White, and Blood, #3. I didn't realize. So Jay Baruchel, I never sure how to pronounce his name. He wrote the lead story. You might know him from such films as Knocked Up and This Is the End and Goon. Yeah, he's in Goon. Little skinny actor kid. He was on Undeclared. Was like the first thing he kind of broke, and in that Apatow verse. So it was fun. It was a funny story. Thierry has a story in here. Stan Sakai did a story, very Usagi-esque, and yeah. So it's just Rosenberg's got a story in here. These are super fun. I hope they do more. They did, like I've said already, they did one with Wolverine, yay, one with Carnage, blah. So I hope they do another one with a character that I do like. Now, like the Punisher. Oh man, yeah. So I've been thinking about that lately, largely because I've been working in the Punisher section. But they haven't done a Punisher book in a while, and I don't even know where Frank is in continuity right now. The last book they did was like right before pandemic, and it was the one that Becky Cloonan was writing. And it was really good. It was also the last book Steve Dillon drew. But yeah, I think they should bring the Punisher back. That's the cool thing about it. Whenever the Punisher kind of goes away for a while, because it does happen. When he comes back, it's usually a big splash, and I love it because he's one of my favorite characters. So also this week, and since I haven't been like buying as many books, I'm like, well, I got a lot of back issues to read and trades and stuff like that. So I've been kind of because I was trying to just read. I have like 10 boxes over there. So I was just trying to read everything. But then there's like just kind of cockeye in there sometimes, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna read these Namors from 1994 when it was terrible, but I don't want to right now. I wanted to read like good stuff. So I found I was kind of digging a little deeper, and I was like, oh, I really want to read this. So I guess I can start. I'll start with this. I reread Age of Ultron. This is a trade paperback of this event, which took place in like 2011. I want to say somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly where I got this. It was either given to me by a buddy of mine, or there was a minute a few years ago where I was doing one of these monthly gift boxes, essentially, or like they were like, they were kind of popular there for a minute in 2019 when you would get a subscription and then once a month they would send you a box of comics and other comic related stuff. I don't remember the name of it now. And you could specify if you wanted Marvel or DC or whatever. So I went with Marvel, obviously. And then I even like after the first couple, I emailed them and I was like, "Is there a way?" And they were agreeable to it because they would send you a chunk like 10 random comics, which is cool. But the only thing was I own every Marvel comic for the last 20 years, or certainly everyone that I want to own because I worked in that shop for so long. So I wrote to them and I was like, "Is there any way to get like pre '05, like anything pre '05? There's a chance I don't have it. There's a better chance I don't have it." And they did. And like if you liked certain I listed like Wolverine as my favorite, so to me a lot of Wolverine stuff. It was cool. It was just like but it was after a while it was like I think it was like $40 a month, which is just kind of steep. And there's a lot of stuff and it was like they was little pops. I don't know if I have them anymore, but like these other little you know tchotchkes that I don't really care about. So I think I might have gotten this from them. Although this retails at 35, but also they probably have obviously a huge backstory. Anyway, the story is so Ultron, as we all know from the films, one of the Avengers' greatest nemesis. Excuse me. And the story starts out where an old Ultron, because they've had to destroy Ultron several times over the years. Oh, that's what it was. Ultron makes his way back to Earth, and he takes over because he was a in the movies he's invented by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, but in the comics he's invented by Hank Pym, who's also not currently in continuity at all. Hank Pym wanted to create an artificial intelligence, like a real one, that was better than anything humans could do, and then of course it went mad with power. It did create the Vision, which is also in the movies, but so every time Ultron comes back, they have to destroy him, otherwise he'll take over. So in this story, he does take over. The heroes that are left have to travel through time to stop Hank Pym, which they do, and then it makes everything worse. It's kind of a standard story like that. That was the thing about reading it. It was still a lot of fun, but I was also, when I read it, I was like, this felt so much more higher stakes when it was coming out, because it was a main event. It was like the big summer crossover. I don't think it was like a crossover though. I think it was just this, like, so I guess it wasn't like a major event, but it was still a pretty big, and it's really good, to be honest with you. And it's Bendis, and I hadn't read any Bendis Marvel stuff in a while, so that was fun too. I also, I'll do this next. I read this big chunk of Thor comics from the early 2000s. There's actually more than this even. I bought these, I believe, from the same. Well, I think it was regardless of who exactly I bought it, because who gives a shit. But I definitely went through a real buy-in binge in 2019. To my regret later, I'm still paying that debt off, but I bought huge chunks of runs. But if they didn't have all of them, I would just buy them anyway. So this goes from like 62, 63 to 65 to 66, 67, 68, and then blah, blah, blah. And then so there's just like holes. This goes from 72 to 74 to 79. But since I have the Marvel Unlimited app, I can read those issues. As much as I love that app, I hate reading it compared to a comic. So every time I finish an issue, I have to go to the app, because it's just, you have to keep turning it depending on which way the panel goes. And the app apparently doesn't work with Kindle very well, and that's of course what I have is a Kindle Fire, so it's always kind of slow when you do the automatic, screen flippy. But it was fun. The thing about this run of Thor, so I had not read this. This was after. Um, no, this is before Disassemble. All right, this is after Heroes Return. And so they started Thor all over, and instead of being bonded with Dr. Donald Blake, Odin essentially creates a guy out of thin air called Jake Olsen, who's a paramedic in New York, and he's all of Thor's like humanity. And he took Thor's humanity and made it like another guy, so Thor could go back to having that secret identity, double life, which superheroes were still at that time very concerned with. The whole secret identity thing almost never comes up anymore, seems to me. So instead of hitting the stick and becoming Don Blake, he becomes Jake Olsen. But this is right after 9/11. The first, like, not this issue, but the first issue in the run I have was like came out the month of 9/11, I would say, whichever month. And it never comes up in the story. I know Marvel definitely did stories that they did a special issue of Spider-Man that addressed. It's embarrassing, to be honest with you. So in this run is mostly written by Dan Jurgens. The start of it was by Dan Abnett, but Dan Jurgens took over, who's more of a DC guy in general. So I'm not very familiar with this stuff. But he wrote The Death of Superman, so I am familiar with that, certainly. The story is, so Thor and Thor become, like, Odin dies at one point, so Thor becomes king of Asgard. Lord of Asgard is the subtitle of this story. Thor is now the All-Father, and he looks to Earth and he sees all these wars and suffering and disease and everything, and he goes, "Well, we're gods; we can handle this." So they do, and then people start worshiping Thor religiously, and it becomes this whole thing of where then it starts to slide into the Squadron Supreme territory. And Grunwald definitely covered all this, but it's still fun to go back to. But if you hand everybody everything, then they're never going to get better. You can't just wave your magic, you know, Mjolnir and cure famine, and that's not good. It's gonna mess everything up. And then Thor, in like eventually the government tries to step in, and Iron Man, and it's just like this big showdown in Sokovia, which is right on the border of Latveria, so it's very tense. And I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, this was all on everyone's minds in 2002. This is all anybody could think about. And so to read it back, reflected through this kind of weird mirror, is really a mind trip. And then, so everybody's trying to talk Thor out of it, including like his own, Balder and Sif are both like, you gotta let these people sort themselves out, because if they just look to a god, they're just not gonna do anything. They're just gonna expect Thor to save everything. And then eventually it gets to where like there's Sophie's choices that he can't make and stuff. But eventually Thor goes, no, I'm going to save all of you. And so he just kind of takes over. And then so the name turns to Thor, Lord of Earth. I don't know if you can read that, and you can see that Thor is now on Mount Rushmore. And it just keeps going. It's really something. Eventually, it goes into the future, and it's become a dystopia where Thor is just running this like fascist government essentially, and Loki's of course like one of his top lieutenants, and his own son rebels against him. And then Thor goes back in time and fixes everything, or something like that. But eventually, it gets to the point where Thor is like, "Oh no, I've made a horrible mistake." Now I don't remember how it gets resolved, but I can check. It is really good stuff. The whole 9/11 thing was what really was blowing my mind. Oh right, okay, yeah, it essentially just travels back in time. Oh right, because Zarko the Tomorrow Man was figured largely in this story, so they used his time travel technology to send Thor back. And then Thor uses the Odin Force to fix everything, which I mean had to be done eventually. But I mean, it was really pretty good. It's not my favorite Thor stuff, but it's still pretty good. Early 2000s, as it turns out, not that great for comics. Which I'm discovering now. At the time, I thought they were great, because at the time I was getting back into them, so I was like, oh wow, these are great. Reading them now, I'm like, oh yeah, they weren't all whatever. And then finally, oh boy, another long one. Weird Western Tales number 39. I didn't remember that I had this. I had a few of these, but uh, the main thing here is that this is the first appearance of Scalp Hunter. So Weird Western Tales was like another anthology, sort of trying to blend horror and Western, or at least supernatural and Western together. And then eventually Jonah Hex kind of just took over. It was Weird Western Tales with Jonah Hex for most of the run, and then they finally gave Jonah Hex his own title. So they were going to cancel this, but then Sergio Aragones, who had written co-created Batlash, and he'd written a lot of other Western stuff for DC. So this is the story that I read. Um, there's depending on sources who created Scalp Hunter. Scalp Hunter is his elevator pitch is he's a white man, but he was raised by a Kiowa tribe from childhood. So he's kind of between both worlds, and his own tribe doesn't quite accept him, and the white man certainly doesn't, and he lives as a Native American, and it's probably offensive, but it's very much of its time. So anyway, they're going to cancel Weird Western Tales once they gave Jonah Hex his own book, and Sergio Aragones was in the office, and he was like, "Why don't we come up with a different character? Why don't we have a new character star in the book?" And so, according to DC in this issue, Sergio and It's Dick Giordano, I want to say. I think it's Giordano or Infantino. Whoever was editor at the time. Dick Ayers. Excuse me, we'll be right with you. Paul Levitz, who was an editor at DC. So they came up with Scalp Hunter, and then they gave it to Michael Fleischer, who had written the bulk of Jonah Hex's adventures to that point, to write the script. They came up with the character and the basic idea, and then Fleischer came up with the script. The way Fleischer tells it is not. It was like they did want a new character for Weird Western Tales, but Fleischer claims that he came up with it. That's the thing, is that in that Fleischer had, I'd forgotten about this, but there's a line, I'm not going to get into it now, God knows, but Fleischer had a long checkered history with DC where they screwed him over here and there, but also it also always has seemed like Fleischer might have been part of the problem also. That's a story for another time when we're not doing Pics of last week. All right, that's it. I have to go make a sandwich because I'm suddenly very hungry. Yeah, it's very similar to that, sort of. It's like a switch. That's how everything seems to be lately, switched on and